If you're to ask me what iPhone would be the right iPhone for someone who likes pro features that they're actually going to use on a daily basis, this would be it, the iPhone 13 Pro. From the extra battery life to the smooth 120Hz display, there's a lot you can really appreciate about this phone, but now that we're going to 2025, I want to do a little quick review on it. I'm going to cover its design, repairability, battery life, performance, cameras, and do a comparison at the end to help give you a better understanding of where this sits compared to iPhones for a bit cheaper and a little bit more. I'm going to start off with the iPhone 13 Pro's design, and design-wise this is very similar to the iPhone 13s with the smaller notch, but there are a few upgrades you get like the frosted glass back, the stainless steel frame which helps make it feel a little bit more premium, you get a telephoto camera, and a LiDAR sensor which helps with augmented reality softwares. Price-wise, you can find the iPhone 13 Pro for $450 and the iPhone 13 Pro Max for the low 500s. I will have affiliate links down below where you can check out the current prices or buy one of these for yourself, which helps fund the channel and me spending time making these videos. So thank you. Probably the greatest thing about the iPhone 13 Pro has to be its display. This is the first iPhone to have a 120Hz display, which makes scrolling for apps and using things a lot smoother. And compare this side by side to an iPhone that doesn't have a 120Hz display, like all the base models, the base model iPhone 15 and even iPhone 16, you're going to instantly notice that the iPhone 13 Pro feels a lot smoother compared to those phones. Now, just to give you a reference here, I used to have an iPhone 12 before I upgraded to my iPhone 15 Pro, and literally the first immediate thing I noticed on a daily basis is this 120Hz display. It makes your phone feel a lot smoother, and once you try a phone with a 120Hz display, you cannot go back. And then with 120Hz too, Apple's base iPhones do not have this feature. Only the iPhone 13 Pro, 14 Pro, 15 Pro, and 16 Pros have this 120Hz feature. You do not get this on the base iPhone 16 or iPhone 15s. Another thing Apple really took seriously with this phone is performance. The iPhone 13 has the A15 Bionic chip, which is a really good processor, and it's also not that old. To give you some perspective, the iPhone 13 Pro came out in late 2021. Typically, iPhones last about 7, maybe even 8 years with the latest iOS updates. So you have about 3 years of latest iOS updates out of this phone, and then another about 2 years of software support updates after that. So in total, you have about 5 years left of use that this iPhone 13 Pro has, which honestly is really good considering the average user holds onto their phone for about 3 years. Overall general performance on this phone is really good. That 120Hz display makes things feel a lot snappier and makes this phone feel a lot faster than what it was if it didn't have that 120Hz display, which I know is really weird to talk about how a display affects performance, but I truly believe that a higher refresh rate display does make the phone feel psychologically a lot faster than what it is. And in terms of load speeds, I noticed load speeds on this phone are also really good. Apps will load in less than a second, and even web pages will load in less than a second if you have good Wi-Fi. So performance-wise, I don't think you're going to be disappointed at all with the iPhone 13 Pro. And then talking about this phone's battery life, you can expect to get 8 to 10 hours of screen on time. And this is based off of what people said online, as well as my personal experience using this phone, which honestly ain't bad. And the iPhone 13 series is when Apple really started to take battery life seriously. So I would say for the average user, who may wakes up at 7 a.m., uses this till like 10 p.m., that's going to be enough battery life you're going to get out of this phone to last you pretty much that full day. And then you can charge it overnight and start a brand new day from 100%. But one thing you do need to keep in mind though is as batteries age over time, they do hold less capacity. So the iPhone 13 Pro Max I have here is probably maybe 2 to 3 years old. It holds 88% of its original battery health. So that means this phone holds 88% of what the battery did compared to what is new. So as you are buying these older phones, probably in a year or two from now, you may want to consider a battery replacement, which is going to cost $89 from Apple. However, I think it's a really good investment, especially if you really care about battery life and you want to get the most battery life out of your phone. And then while this phone definitely performs well, one thing you are missing out on with the iPhone 13 Pros is this thing called Apple Intelligence, which is Apple's on-device AI processing that allows you to do things like certain writing tools, image generation, and just editing things out of images. Personally, I haven't used these AI features a lot on my iPhone 15 Pro, which does support it, but if this is something you care about, I have some unfortunate news. You need to buy an iPhone 15 Pro or newer, or iPhone 16 Pro and newer. For some odd reason, the iPhone 15s, the regular ones, and the iPhone 14s and older do not support Apple Intelligence, so if you really care about those AI features, again, you're gonna have to spend quite a little bit of money there. Another downside with the iPhone 13 Pros too is repairability. This is a little bit more expensive than the average smartphone to replace, but I have some prices here. The screen's gonna cost you $280 from Apple for the iPhone 13 Pro, $330 for the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Third party though, it's a bit cheaper. You can get a non-OLED cheap LCD screen with a 60Hz display for $150 to $200. A back glass is $450 to $500 from Apple. Third parties, it's $200 to $300. And then most other repairs for this phone are gonna be anywhere between $80 to $250. So definitely be careful with this phone. Get a good case and a good screen protector. And if you're the type of person who breaks your phone a lot, I'd really consider seeing if there's like an insurance plan you could get for one of these things. And then something Apple really took seriously with the iPhone 13 Pros is camera quality. I think a lot of smartphone companies are starting to take camera quality more seriously now, as content creation is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And the iPhone 13 Pro does have a few upgrades compared to the regular iPhone 13 in terms of camera features. You're getting an extra 12 megapixel telephoto camera for 3x optical zoom. You have night mode portraits, macro photography, and then you also have Apple Pro RAW for very high quality videos and editors who need, raw footage to work with. But if those features aren't interesting to you, I would say the iPhone 13's cameras are going to be just as good for the average daily use, so your typical photos and videos that you're probably going to be taking on this phone. So probably by now you have a good understanding of how well the iPhone 13 Pro holds up going into 2025, but what are some iPhones you can consider for a bit more or a bit less? First up, we have the iPhone 13, which you can find for $370. The iPhone 13 is pretty similar to the iPhone 13 Pro in a lot of ways, like it has the same smaller notch design and the A15 Bionic chip, so it's going to last just as long as the iPhone 13 Pro. However, there are a few things you do miss out on with the regular iPhone 13, like you have an aluminum frame instead of the stainless steel frame, 10% less battery life, you have a 60Hz refresh rate display instead of the smooth 120Hz refresh rate display on the iPhone 13 Pro. You're missing out on some camera features that I mentioned earlier, but overall, I think the iPhone 13 is a pretty good option to consider if you're someone who doesn't really care about technology a lot and you just want something that's a newer phone that's going to last you for quite a while. And then for a little bit more expensive, we have the iPhone 14 Pros. You can find the iPhone 14 Pro for $520 and the iPhone 14 Pro Max for $600. The iPhone 14 Pros do bring quite a few upgrades compared to the iPhone 13 Pro, like this thing called the Dynamic Island, which is basically a little island at the top of the phone's display that works as you're using certain apps and functions on the phone. It also has an always on display, which is really nice for seeing notifications that are coming in. You have a 1 year newer processor, and the iPhone 14 Pros and iPhone 14s do have more emergency SOS features, like emergency SOS via satellite and crash detection. You do have a 48 megapixel rear camera instead of a 12 megapixel rear camera on the iPhone 13 Pros, so you can get quite a bit more detail with your photos. And the iPhone 14 Pros too do have this on-device AI processing called the Photonic Engine, which supposedly helps with better color and lighting as you're taking photos. And then if you're looking to expand into a bit of the newer territory, I would highly recommend the iPhone 15 Pros. You can find the iPhone 15 Pro for $680 and the iPhone 15 Pro Max for about $850. And there's quite a few upgrades you do get with the iPhone 15 Pro series, like this titanium frame. They switch over to USB-C charging instead of Lightning. You have this action button that you can program to do certain functions on your phone. You have shrink bezels, which gives a more sleek design to the screen. The A17 Pro chip, which gets you Apple Intelligence and about another year or two of software updates. Log video recording for professionals who like to do color grading with their videos. Wi-Fi 6E, and that's pretty much it. So you are getting quite a few upgrades with the iPhone 15 Pro, but you also are kind of spending quite a bit more money to get those features. I'll leave links to these phones in the description for you guys to check out, as well as a playlist up on screen of more useful iPhone videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.